Ciao and welcome back to our Italian course for beginners. This is lesson 6, Lezione 6. I'm very glad to know that you're finding it useful, and thank you very much for your comments. I can see that some of you are actually going quite fast, so I need to keep up. And by the way, let me know, how are you using these sessions, these lessons? Do you already study on a course, like in a class, for example, or are you studying by yourself? Are you following a book? And what do you do? Do you do exercises that you can where you can practice the things that I also cover in the lessons? Thank you very much also for subscribing, for liking the videos and sharing them and leaving comments. And feel free to ask for more information, clarification, or explanation about anything I include in my lessons. Right, today we are going to see words that we can use to ask questions. So when, what, how, who, I have said what already, where. So let's see all of them. We have seen a couple so far in the first couple of lessons, and let's see the other ones. I'm going to share the document I have prepared, and we'll see which words we have to ask questions and how we can use them. So here we have, first of all, we have dove. Dove, we saw it also on our very first lesson. Dove means where. We have also quando. Quando means when. Come means how, literally. Che cosa means what. Che cosa means what, followed by a verb. And then we have che, which also means what, but followed by a noun. And finally we have chi. Chi means who. And remember that this word means who only in questions. Especially in regard to the last three, che cosa, che, and chi, I do have a separate video, not in this playlist for the Italian for beginners, but in my other videos, which are videos that where I cover different topics or different things that normally people find a little bit difficult or challenging or tricky. So there is one video in particular which is dedicated to che cosa, che, and chi. You can watch it and you'll have a bit more information about these three. Right. So let's see. We did see, in fact, the word order. We have seen it in the first lesson for sure, and others probably as well. But let's see it again. So when we have these words, when we're asking actual information about where, when, how, and what, and who, here is the word order. So we have, first of all, we have the person, which is in brackets, because as I said before, we don't really need to use it all the time. We use it only for emphasis. For example, if we have two people in front of us and we want to ask, what's your name? And then we want to ask the other person, and what about you? What is your name? In the second case, we would use to. What about you? So it is a bit more emphatic. Otherwise, remember that the verb, the conjugation of the verb in Italian always tells us who we are talking about, who we are talking to. And that is why we don't need to use the person. But if you do need it, that is the position. So not in the middle of the question, which is how you do it in English. If you do need to or want to use the person, you put it at the very beginning of the sentence. You can also put it at the end. But let's go with the classic word order. So I've used each of the words for questions for an example. So let's see all of them. The first one is dove sei? Dove sei? Where are you? Quando vai in Italia? These are new words. If you've only been following my lessons and without the help of anything else, these are completely new words. So we have quando, which means when. Vai is a verb that I haven't used so far. Vai is from the verb andare, which is to go. So when do you go? Literally, when you go to Italy. Literally, but as you can see, in Italian, it is said in different ways. And let me remind you that I do have another video in the not the playlist for the Italian for beginners, but in the other videos that covers how to use in and how to use a. Also a video whose title is something like how to translate to after the verb to go. So that video will also be useful. Anyway, let's not get distracted. So, quando vai in Italia means when are you going to Italy? When do you go to Italy? The next question, come vai a casa? How do you go home? Meaning which means of transport you're using. Also, you can ask this question if you are asking somebody if they are getting a lift, if they got a car, or they're using a means of transport. So how are you going home? Another question, che cosa fai domani? What are you doing tomorrow? Literally, what do you do tomorrow? Next question. In fact, let me remind you, che cosa, as I said, means what, followed by a verb. There is also another verb that we haven't used so far. It means to do. So what you do tomorrow, domani. Another question using che, which means what, but before a noun. What job you do. So what job do you do? And next question is, con chi vai al cinema? With whom you go to the cinema, literally. So this is something to keep in mind as well, because it's different from English. And when we have questions with the preposition in English, in English you have two options. You can either put it at the beginning, which is the traditional, a little bit more elegant, sophisticated way of using it or asking a question. But normally in the colloquial spoken language, it is put at the very end. For example, who are you going to the cinema with? You're not going to hear many people asking with whom you go to the cinema. So yes, these are a couple of things to keep in mind. The word order. So never put the person in the middle of the question. And if you have a preposition, meaning those little words that mean with, from, of, to, do not put them at the end, ever. It's completely wrong in Italian. You can only put them at the very beginning, just before the word for the question. Con chi. In this case, with whom. Now let's go back to these questions and let's find an answer for these questions. Let's give these questions an answer. So let's start again. The question, dove sei? Where are you? We can answer with, for example, io, which remember we can leave out, but we are putting it for just to have a complete sentence. Io sono a casa. I am at home. Second question. Quando vai in Italia? When are you going to Italy? Literally, when you go to Italy. Let's go to Italy tomorrow. We are going to drop the io. We are not going to use it now. Vado in Italia domani. Domani. So I'm going to Italy tomorrow. Literally, I go to Italy tomorrow. And by the way, for the moment, even if when you're talking about the future, the near future, don't worry about learning the future tense, because for the future tense, you can use the present. Tomorrow I go. Next week I go as well, which is good news, I would say. So don't worry, especially at this stage and even a little bit later on, don't worry too much about the future tense. The present and the past tense are more important, more useful. Come vai a casa? How are you going home? Literally, how you go home. Shall we go by car? Vado in macchina. I go literally in. I go by car. Again, in my video that talks about in and a, you can find examples for means of transport as well. Che cosa fai domani? What are you doing tomorrow? Literally, what you do tomorrow. What are we doing tomorrow? Domani, let's see if there is enough space. Domani, I think we're going to Italy again. Vado in Italia, yes. Tomorrow I go to Italy. We are keeping it a little bit, just reusing a little bit the same words. Che lavoro fai? What job you do? And by the way, I do have a very brief video about work and job and how to say what job you do. It's separate, not in the playlist of Italian for Beginners. So what job do we do? We work in a shop. Lavoro in un negozio. I work in a shop. Obviously, you can answer to this question in different ways. In all of these questions, you can answer in different ways. Con chi vai al cinema? Who do you go to the cinema with? Who are you going to the cinema with? Let's go with Marco, the usual Marco and Valeria. We're going to use them. Vado con Marco. I go with Marco. So here we've got quite a few new words compared to the last few lessons, including some very important verbs. So far we have seen only one irregular verb, essere, to be, and then we've seen a couple of regular verbs. And let me remind you that there is a separate video about conjugating regular verbs in the present. You can watch that and it will help you to understand a bit better. Here I've listed the verbs that I have used today, which are irregular. Irregular verbs, if you remember from the very first lesson when we saw essere, to be, are quite different when we conjugate them, meaning quite different from do you remember what I call the original form of the verb, which is called infinitive, which is what you find in a dictionary. And then you need to conjugate these verbs. So here we have, I'm not going to conjugate essere because we saw it in lesson 1. We have fare. Fare means to do and also to make. Very, very important verb, of course. As you can see, it is quite irregular, meaning it changes quite a lot with each other. They're very different from each other and also very different from the original. So let me read it so you can see the pronunciation. Io faccio, tu fai, lui, lei fa, noi facciamo, voi fate, loro fanno. And then we have andare, also very, very important. It means to go. And let me read the conjugation of all the different persons. Remember that the conjugation is always in the same word order. And that's why we don't need to put the io, tu, etc., etc. It is, we can take it for granted, the fact that it is always in the same order. So let me read it for you. Vado, vai, va, andiamo, andate, vanno. These irregular verbs, they just need to be studied by heart because there isn't really a pattern. You can find a pattern instead in the regular verbs. And this is an example of a regular verb. In fact, let me just see. You can actually compare and see how much these first two that we've seen, how much they differ from, as I said, the infinitive. Look at these ones, all the conjugations, how different they are from this one, from the original, the infinitive. Same here. I don't know why I underlined faccio. There's no reason for it. And instead, here we have a regular verb. And as you can see, it is quite similar to the infinitive. We are just dropping the last 3 letters and we're adding 1 letter, which is always the same for each, for the verb, for each person. So here we have lavoro, lavori, lavora. Lavoriamo, lavorate, lavorano. Is to work. So these are, as I said, a little example and comparison between regular verbs and irregular verbs, and also how to ask questions, which order to use when you're asking questions. And I've given you some examples on how to answer them. And obviously, slowly and gradually, and you can and will enrich your vocabulary. So you start from just going to the cinema tomorrow with Marco, and then slowly you can do a lot more exciting things with different people. And so this, as I said, it is very gradual learning and widening your vocabulary. You can do it in different ways. Different people also have different ways to learn, and what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for for another person. So sometimes just some people, just by listening, they can pick words. So it's more of an intuitive learning. Others like to know exactly what every word means and where it comes from. When it comes to verbs, as I said, with the regular verbs, you can learn the pattern and you can apply the rules to each infinitive. So you learn the infinitive and you work out the pattern in your mind. Remember that with the irregular verbs, you need to study them by heart because they change a lot. The stem of the verb changes. And a very a good way to learn, even if it's very old school, is drills, meaning just repeating, and writing the same thing over and over. Because we do learn by practicing and repeating the same things many times. So unless you have the opportunity to do so um, in whichever context or situation you are in, if you have Italian friends, for example, if you watch programs or you have a book, you listen to a book, audiobook or whatever, which in fact I'm very curious to know how and what you do for your learning. So unless you are doing that, you just have to take a notepad, a pen, and just write many, many times these verbs until they, they stay in your mind, you memorize them, or until they make a little bit more sense and you learn at least a few. And then gradually you will learn more and more. And when I say a few, I don't mean just a few verbs. You can, for example, decide to learn at the beginning just the conjugations for io and tu. So when you're comfortable and confident with those, you can add, for example, lui and lei, or you can add noi. It is up to you, also according to what you think is a little bit more useful for your situation. And also whatever, sometimes, if you find one thing a little bit easier, go for that. And it helps building your confidence a little bit because it's very easy to lose confidence and just to find learning anything really overwhelming. So don't make it difficult for yourself. And it is very important not to lose the pleasure of learning for whichever reason you are learning the language. Anyway, I will say bye for now. Thank you very much for watching again, and feel free, as I said, to write a comment and let me know your thoughts, and also if you need to ask for explanations. Right, so I will see you on our next lesson, which will be lezione 7, lesson 7, and with something new to learn. And I will say bye for now e ci vediamo la prossima volta. Ciao!